They let me pick. Did I ever tell you that? Choose whichever Spartan I wanted. You know me. I did my research, watched as you became the soldier we needed you to be. Like the others, you were strong and swift and brave. A natural leader. But you had something they didn't. Something no one saw but me. Can you guess? Luck.
Halo, the Xbox's golden boy. I think that at this point, it's safe to say that the Master Chief stands amongst the most famous and recognizable of video game characters. The green helmet and brass visor is as iconic to me as Mario's mustache and red hat. Maybe Sonic the Hedgehog's blue spikes and sneakers might be a better comparison, but I know goddamn well he's more famous than the God of War himself, Kratos. Sorry if that offends all you PlayStation people, but I'm just calling it how it is. It's safe to say that there are few franchises in gaming history as recognizable as Halo, and this remains true despite the franchise's decline in popularity over the last decade. Regardless of its current state in gaming, the Master Chief remains a face on the Mount Rushmore of the gaming industry. But to understand why, we have to journey back to the beginning, back to when Steve Jobs first brought out Bungie's co-founder Jason Jones to speak about Halo at Macworld in the late 90s. It's from this point that we can begin to understand what it is about Halo that makes the franchise so iconic and what impact it's had on the gaming industry as a whole. With that being said, over the duration of this video, we will be taking a closer look at the original Bungie trilogy of games, Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2, and Halo 3. I'm definitely going to spend more time talking about Combat Evolved than I am the other two games, but that's just because it was the first game to come out in the franchise, and it did a ton to innovate in the FPS genre. But before we get into it, I need to make sure that we're all on the same page and ask the important question: what is Halo?
What is that thing, Lieutenant?
Halo is a first-person shooter science fiction series that was first created by Bungie Studios and passed on to 343 Studios and published by Microsoft. The delineation of custodianship over the franchise is important to know when analyzing the franchise as a whole, but that's a video for a different day. In the meantime, let me give a brief explanation of what the series is about. Throughout the majority of the series, players experience the universe that Halo is set in through the eyes of our armor-clad protagonist, John 117, better known as the Master Chief. John never reveals his face and seldom speaks. Take note of that. The Halo TV show, this is just not the Master Chief. Regardless, the fact that John never takes off his helmet, I'm not going to call him John anymore, it feels weird, it feels like I'm talking about someone I know. The fact that the Master Chief never takes off his helmet and he rarely speaks makes him the perfect vessel for the player to immerse themselves in. At risk of sounding redundant, the Master Chief is the player, and in turn, the player is the Master Chief. Big brain moment, I know, but I feel like it's got to be said, just in case there's someone here who isn't familiar with the silent protagonist or something like that. But it's through the Master Chief that we get to fight various species of aliens, bring down misguided fanatical religious zealots that they fight for, and of course, save the galaxy from space zombies. So yeah, for all intent and purpose, he's the perfect vehicle for us to live out our most badass space fantasies. Alright, I'm done being super repetitive. As I sort of touched on earlier, Halo was originally designed to be a computer game. Mac exclusive, actually. Could you imagine? Maybe not, but since I'm recording this on a Mac, and I haven't owned a PC in 5 years, I can picture myself trying to run Halo 1 on this janky MacBook Air. This just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. You should see me try to stream. It eats up 25% of my CPU. Didn't used to do that. Now it does. Anyways, Halo was originally designed for Mac, and it was initially intended to be some sort of top-down real-time strategy game, similar to Bungie's previous Myth game. As a matter of fact, it was during the development of the sequel to Myth that two dudes from Bungie, Jason Jones and Marcus Leto, would start working on the game that they fondly referred to as Blam. This is also where Martin O'Donnell steps into the picture, but we'll speak more about Marty later on in this video. Continuing on, after coming to the conclusion that a sci-fi themed RTS game was essentially Myth with a different coat of paint, the developers transitioned the game to a third-person action-adventure game, with vast open-world elements marking Blam's first steps towards evolving into what we know as Halo 1, or Halo CE, or Halo Combat Evolved. And it's because of this background of it being an RTS at first that we have the two Halo Wars games, which if you haven't played, I highly recommend you do. This brings us to 1998. Myth 2 launched with a game-breaking bug that cost Bungie hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it was like around 800,000, maybe more. Regardless, it was a lot of money for them at the time, meaning that the future of the company was largely a contingent on the success of Halo. As a result, Bungie threw a Hail Mary and invited Steve Jobs to take a sneak peek of the early build of Halo. What he saw must have blown him away, because in 1999, at the Macworld event, he introduced Halo to the public and brought out Jason Jones to speak about the project.
Very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see for the first time Halo. Welcome, Jason.
Let me backtrack a little bit, because it's important to understand the magic, or rather the luck, that Bungie had during the development of Halo CE and later on Halo 2. They got confirmation about their prominent spot in the Macworld event, and the team had to scramble to put together a Halo demo that would work on the Mac. Sure, that wasn't easy. Actually, we know that it wasn't easy because during the process, the team struggled to get the audio they had intended for the demo to work properly. So at quite literally the last minute, the team scrapped their original plan, but in one of the most famous moments in game development history, Marty O'Donnell saved the day by writing some music in his car, then composing it in the same day and sending the file over to New York to be used for the demo. So yeah, the iconic Halo theme song was created in the last minute, off a whim, for the last resort for the demo. This sort of magic from Bungie during times of extreme crunch is one of the main themes that will be highlighted throughout this video. Actually, looking back at it, it's really not highlighted that much. There's a lot of crunch for Halo 1 and Halo 2, but I didn't really highlight it that much for Halo 2. Anyways, despite the hype Bungie generated after their Macworld presentation, the company was still struggling to keep their head above water, ushering in the deal to be acquired by Microsoft. There's a lot more to this deal, and a lot of interesting details about Bungie's battle to stay afloat, but for the sake of brevity, I'm gonna leave it out. There's a couple of YouTube videos you could go check out, or you could just look it up. It's pretty well documented. Bungie wasn't doing too well with the whole Myth fiasco, so yeah, there was this deal with Take-Two, and then Microsoft bought Take-Two bought Take-Two and took Bungie as well, something like that. For the context of this video, it's not important at all, so I don't know why I even brought it up. What is important is now you understand that Bungie is owned by Microsoft, which it was until 2011 or 2012, whenever they went to go start working on Destiny. I know this video is supposed to be focusing on what spot in the gaming history Halo is in, or at least what spot the original trilogy is in and its influence on the gaming industry, and I know I haven't even touched on it yet, but bear with me. This stuff is really important to understand the context of what got delivered and how we understand Halo today. This is a pretty interesting story. I'm not doing it any justice, so I'm sure there's hundreds of videos out there you can go watch that are doing a way better job explaining it. The point is, putting Halo CE out put Bungie through development hell, as it went through multiple iterations to get to the point where we have it now. Holy shit, where was I? In 2000, Microsoft bought Bungie. From a business standpoint, this move turned out to be highly lucrative. It took Halo away from Apple, and it gave Microsoft a golden boy to generate hype for the new console, the Xbox. The original Xbox, not the Xbox One, which is the dumbest marketing ever, to call your third Xbox the Xbox One. That's the only time where Sony's got Xbox beat, in my opinion. And in a few exclusives, but we're not going to admit that on YouTube. Regardless, you have to take into consideration the full atmosphere of the gaming industry at the time. Mario was already a household name, Nintendo's N64 and Game Boy Color were wildly popular, and Sony's PlayStation 2, what a bunch of nerds considered to be the greatest console of all time, just launched in March. It was the greatest console of all time. I can't even lie, it was so damn sick. So to put it bluntly, there were already two top dogs dominating the market, and I don't think anyone thought that they needed a third contender. Obviously, I can't say that for sure, because at this point in history, I was quite literally a cell swimming around. So it seems that realistically, Xbox should have been doomed to fail, and if it did, so too would have Bungie. Obviously that didn't happen, and as an Xbox fanboy, I am beyond thankful. Could you tell? Could you tell I'm an Xbox fanboy? What did happen is Bungie had to once again scramble to build a new version of Halo, one that would work on the Xbox's hardware. On top of making yet another build of the game, the team had to craft a compelling narrative, cut out much of the open world elements, switch the title from a third-person action-adventure game to a first-person shooter, and make the physical control scheme functional for the Duke. In order to achieve all this before the launch of Xbox, the guys over at Bungie had to endure painfully long work weeks in order to make sure the game was polished, or at least as polished as they could make it in the time they had. This meant cutting out loads of content, to the point where even the multiplayer split-screen co-op was on the chopping block until just a few weeks before launch. Once the time came where Bungie had to hand a finished copy of the game over to Microsoft, all they could do was sit and wait. At the time, no one knew if Halo was going to be a success, and yet there was so much riding on it. But after years of twists and turns in its development, Halo would finally launch in 2001 as the poster boy for the Xbox. In the first year of its release, Halo achieved over 1 million sales, and it was purchased alongside half of all Xbox sales. By 2006, that number rose up to 4.2 million copies sold, making Halo Combat Evolved the second highest selling game released between January 2000 and July of 2006, across Xbox, PlayStation, and GameCube, according to Next Generation. Setting the numbers aside, it's safe to say that Halo was a bigger success than I think anyone would have guessed. But why? What is it about this game that made it such a hit? And why is it remembered so fondly over 2 decades later? That brings us to the point where I can finally talk about the game. Good lord, I can finally talk about the game. Okay, Halo 1 offered a thrilling narrative for players to experience across 6 unique levels. 10 different levels. Sorry. This conversation about Halo 1's recycled assets is so overdone at this point, and this will be the only time I speak about it. And for the record, I feel like these complaints on this topic are a little nitpicky. Like, it works, you know? It's not the end of the world. The game's 2 decades old. Why do people still care? I say that, but I'm excluding the library, because fuck that level. Oh my god. Fuck that level. The first of these 10 levels, Pillar of Autumn, serves as the tutorial for the rest of the game, while simultaneously immersing players into the sci-fi universe that Halo is set in. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the specifics of each level, but it's important to note that even though the first level serves as a tutorial, it doesn't do a lot of hand-holding. What I mean by that is after waking up from cryosleep, going through a super brief tutorial that teaches you how to look and move, look at the lights and everything, the player is almost instantaneously thrown into the action as you make your way towards the bridge. Seriously, there's a portion of this section where you're bobbing and weaving without a gun in your hand. You're just dodging plasma fire all around you. It's actually terrifying. I remember as a kid, the first time I played that. You can feel the intensity of the situation even when you play in the OG graphics, over 20 years later. As you make your way through the chaos, you can't help but wonder who these aliens are and why the hell they followed you all the way through slip space. At least if it's your first time playing. If you know the games, then you know why they followed you. But regardless, thankfully, once you do reach the bridge, everything's kind of explained. We get a transition into a quick cutscene with some well-placed exposition in the dialogue that tells us that the enemy we're fighting is called the Covenant. As the game progresses, we learn that the Covenant is some sort of multi-species elitist club that hates humans. That's honestly a pretty good synopsis of what the Covenant is, but you'd have to add like a multi-species elitist club that hates humans because some religious zealots known as the Prophets told them to. And that pretty much summarizes the Covenant. Not really. There's a lot more to it, but I'm getting carried away, so moving on. As we mow the invading aliens down, we are given our first glimpse into the game's sandbox, which features a variety of weapons for us to pick and choose throughout our journey. The only caveat is we can only carry 2 guns at once, alongside a handful of grenades. Combat Evolved was not the first game to introduce the 2-weapon system, but it was the game that popularized it. We know this because after Combat Evolved's release, almost all FPS games that followed it started using that 2-weapon system. The system is functional and practical. It works super well, especially when you're just gunning down
any inhuman son of a bitch.
That is until you're instructed to abandon ship, marking the end of the first level of Halo 1. I can vividly remember the feeling I had playing through this level for the first time as a kid. Even as an adult, I still get that sort of giddy feeling, so it's no wonder why people initially got so hooked on the game. It just sort of throws you to the wolves. Seriously. The captain of the ship, Jacob Keyes, literally hands you a pistol, tells you he doesn't have ammo for it, before sending you off to go fight like 100 aliens.
I don't keep it loaded, son. You'll have to find ammo as you go.
What the fuck did he expect us to do? Fucking throw the pistol at them and then just start beating their doonies down with our fists? Actually, that'd be pretty sick if Master Chief was just going through there, bah, bah, bah. Anyways, after hopping into a life pod and crash landing onto the mysterious ring world, at the start of the second level, we are officially on Halo. And holy shit, to this day, 20 years later, this is still one of the best, I want to do air quotes, the training wheels are off, have fun kid moments. Just, throw you at them. I think the best comparison I could make to capture what I'm trying to say would be to compare it to the leaving the vault Fallout experience, where you open the door and you emerge from the hole in the ground and you are just introduced to a playground. And honestly, I feel like landing on the ring in Halo Combat Evolved kind of does it better than Fallout. Obviously, it's not the same thing, but it's like the same feeling. From the scenery, the environment that we are introduced to the music, Halo 1's second level, appropriately named Arriving on Halo, is a masterpiece. And if I had to try to explain to someone why Halo 1 is such a legendary game, I would just show them this level. Arriving on Halo gives players a taste of everything Combat Evolved has to offer. From the tangible emotional responses guided by the masterfully composed music brought to us by the man, the myth, the legend, Marty O'Donnell, paired with the game's timeless art style that just captures the aura of Halo so perfectly. I can't imagine it looking any different than it does. This level is the first introduction to all that lies ahead, and it's why I call this level a masterpiece. Don't get me wrong, Marty's music and the ambiance hits just right across all 10 levels in CE. Just Arriving on Halo is just the perfect introduction to all of it. From the moment you land on Halo, you are met with this feeling of mystery and wonder, while simultaneously being able to taste this tingling eeriness of being alone on this strange ring world. Well, you wouldn't be alone if Chief hadn't chosen to not wear a seatbelt. But no, this 2-ton hunk of metal decided he'd just bounce around off the walls in the escape pod as it crash lands onto a mysterious ring world, crushing all the Marines inside. Regardless, you as the player feel what the Master Chief feels the second that you step out of the life pod, ignoring the fact that you probably killed all the Marines by accident, or they're just being reckless. And you are thinking exactly what the Master Chief is thinking. You're like, what is this place? And that visceral feeling sets the tone as you progress through the game until you finally answer the question, what is Halo? Answering that question in itself could have easily been the entire plot driving the story of Combat Evolved. As a matter of fact, as you get through the first few levels of the game intentionally makes it feel like unlocking the mysteries of Halo is your primary goal. And in a way it is. But at the end of the 5th mission, halfway through the game, the tone totally switches. And everyone probably knows what I'm talking about. The Master Chief learns that the Halo is a weapon, and so too does the player, obviously. And that fills you with this feeling of urgency to stop the Covenant from using the weapon. And then you think that's your new goal. But then Bungie's like, nah, fuck it, space zombies. This introduction to the Flood replaces that feeling of mystery and wonder that you once had back on Arriving on Halo with this new pant-shitting fear. And I don't think it matters what age you are. 343 Guilty Spark stands as one of the scariest levels in a video game, and I'm an adult and I still stand by that, and I dread playing that level every time I go through a Halo playthrough just because it still gets me. I don't know what it is, there's just a feeling about that experience that Bungie nailed, and it's the perfect time to switch up the gameplay because you're getting so used to killing the Covenant and they're not even a challenge anymore. Now all of a sudden you've got to switch up your whole play style. It's amazing, it's great, it's top tier peak video game bullshittery. And what I mean by that is the tonal switch that this twist gives the game manages to completely change the way the player feels. Not to mention the left turn it forces the direction of the game's story to take. The moment the Flood are introduced, the stakes are higher. As the player, you no longer feel safe and secure holding a gun unless it's a shotgun. You become hyper vigilant of your surroundings, and for first time players, this is actually terrifying. It's not until the end of the game that you get to breathe the sigh of relief, and in case you somehow haven't played Halo 1 before, that's where I'll leave this discussion of the game's overall story, so I don't spoil the ending. So, after people beat Halo 1 back in the day, I imagine everyone was just craving more of this game. This had to have been my 100th time beating Combat Evolved, and I can safely say I was stoked to move on to Halo 2 afterward. But in 2001, Halo fans didn't exactly have that luxury. So what were they supposed to do? Go play Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone? Fuck no. No one wanted to do that. No one wanted to play that game. That game is trash. This is where I'll insert the picture of Cursed Hagrid from that game. People didn't want a Harry Potter themed collectathon with Cursed Hagrid. They wanted more Halo. And it just so happened that they could have an entirely different aspect of Halo that was separate from the campaign experience, that being the multiplayer split-screen co-op. This might seem foreign to anyone under the age of 18, but back in the day, inviting over a couple of your friends to go duke it out over some split-screen multiplayer was the shit, and Halo popularized it. Even though 343 has tragically neglected this facet of Halo, even though it was fundamental in its popularity at the beginning, Bungie's decision to not cut multiplayer split-screen co-op during the development of Halo CE may just have been the smartest decision that they made across CE's entire development. This is undoubtedly a pretty bold claim to make, but it's because of the multiplayer co-op that Halo stayed relevant during the 3-year-long wait for Halo 2. It gave the game, and furthermore the Xbox, a sort of social aspect that just hadn't been seen before in the same way. And it's all thanks to this unique arena-style gameplay and the maps like Blood Gulch and the variety of Halo's weapons and vehicle sandbox. Which reminds me, I haven't even touched on the vehicles in this entire video. This is getting long and I haven't even gotten into Halo 2 or Halo 3, so you can drive several different vehicles in Halo 1, allowing for a nice change of pace and gameplay during both the campaign and when you're fighting against your friends. The vehicle physics are notoriously bad by today's standards, but for the time, they're pretty exceptional. Anyways, the arena-style combat of Halo 1's multiplayer adopted a lot of the same concepts introduced to the FPS genre by games like Quake, only Halo did it on a smaller, more refined scale, and what set Halo apart was its map design and, as I mentioned previously, the weapons sandbox. It was such a unique experience for the time. The best way to describe it would have to be like dorm room gaming, which I'm pretty sure that's how the Bungie devs describe it in one of the videos online, but I don't know for sure, someone would have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. When I was in the dorm, the equivalent would have been to play Smash Bros on the Switch, so it's basically the same thing, just Halo combat versus Smash Bros combat. Before moving on to the next phase of the video, I'd like to backtrack a little and acknowledge one other aspect of Halo's campaign that I've hardly touched on: the characters. Halo 1 did exactly what it needed to do for the franchise in terms of character development. The Master Chief served as the vessel for the player, as I mentioned earlier, and as a result, he doesn't have too much of a personality. Thankfully, his AI companion Cortana more than makes up for that. Even the side characters are fleshed out just enough, with Captain Keyes serving as the no-nonsense ship captain, your pilot Echo 419 being your sort of guardian angel, and even the Marines serve as the comic relief. Bungie had no idea if there was a sequel in the forecast for Halo when they were developing the game, so they didn't focus too much on characterization. Combat Evolved had to be its own standalone game, and if it were, I think it would still be a legendary title in gaming history. Thankfully, the little characterization Bungie did give to all the characters served as the perfect foundation to build from for Halo 2. With that being said, it's no wonder that Combat Evolved was such a huge success. Everything about it is nearly perfect, and it innovated on things in the FPS genre in ways that you can still see being used in the norm in contemporary gaming. Halo didn't invent the two-weapon system, but it refined it, and it popularized it. The same is true for the weapon sandbox and its physical controls. Above all else, Halo established that the FPS genre can work as a medium to tell a compelling story, which is the perfect time to transition to talking about Halo 2. I'm going to quote what the Ackman said about Halo 2 in his video titled, "Why is Halo 2's campaign so awesome?" If Halo CE was the golden child, then Halo 2 was the badass younger brother that just didn't give a fuck. Not only did Halo 2's campaign thicken the plot of Halo's story, it's also full of some of the most badass one-liners of all time.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
Permission granted.
One question. What if you miss?
I won't.
good.
Now, obviously, I'm playing all these games in the MCC version, so they're a little different than what we saw back in the day, but this recreation of this cutscene from Blur Studios is what I felt like I saw as a kid back in 2004 when Halo 2 came out. Setting the absolute badassery of the Halo 2 remaster aside, much like its predecessor, Halo 2 had a rough development, but for very different reasons. Most Halo fans are likely familiar with Halo 2's rocky development, considering it was very heavily documented by Bungie employees. So I'll try to explain this the best I can. Coming off the hype that the first game generated, expectations for Halo 2 were high, and Bungie had a ton of ideas for how to take the second game even further than before. The only issue was, at the beginning of Halo 2's development cycle, no one could pinpoint exactly what direction to take Halo 2's story. Additionally, there were some major leadership changes in the studio, making it so some people had to fill vacant roles that they weren't prepared to manage. Basically, they were like kids in a candy shop. To paint the picture a little bit more vividly, it was kind of more like the game development was equivalent to when your eyes are too big for your stomach and you have a ton of delicious food in front of you, but you don't know where to start. Only in this case, there was too many brilliant ideas and too many technical limitations, with no one capable of efficiently directing the workflow. To state things that bluntly definitely makes Bungie sound a little bit incompetent, and that's definitely not the case. They were just really excited to put a good game out, and they had so many ideas, and with the leadership changes, they were a little bit disorganized. Not to mention that Bungie also had Microsoft looming over them as they hoped for a quick turnaround in order to capitalize on the launch of Xbox's multiplayer service, Xbox Live. And with Xbox Live in mind, Bungie was putting a larger focus on the multiplayer side of Halo 2, and of course they knocked it out of the park. But while the multiplayer side of things was going smoothly during development, the campaign hadn't made too much headway. So by early 2003, Microsoft was growing impatient and pushing Bungie to release the game in an unfinished state so that it could be out in time for the holiday season. Thankfully, the head of Microsoft's gaming division pushed back and threatened to quit if Bungie was forced to put the game out early. God, can we just take a second to appreciate that? Imagine if we had more executives doing stuff like that and giving the developers more time to work on the things that they're, putting their heart and soul into. We would have so many better games, specifically during the time of 2013 to 2020. You could even make the argument that this still happens today where games are just pushed out and rushed. But God, what a dude. Continuing on, this bought Bungie some additional time to work out what needed to be done with Halo 2's story. Ultimately, the team decided to cut an entire third of the game, leaving fans with a disappointing and slightly awkward cliffhanger ending. Despite this, upon release, to no one's surprise, Halo 2 drastically outperformed Combat Evolved in terms of sales. Although the campaign was met with mixed reviews at the time, today it's widely regarded by fans as one of, if not the best single-player experience in Halo. There's many reasons behind why the campaign was met with such a polarized response at the time. Most of it had to do with the fact that your time was split between playing as the Arbiter and the Master Chief. Regardless of the single player's initial reception, what truly made Halo 2 an even bigger success than Combat Evolved was its multiplayer. With Xbox Live up and running, Halo fans can now not only play split-screen co-op, but also duke it out in online matchmaking. Xbox wasn't the first console to implement an online multiplayer service, and Halo certainly wasn't the first game to introduce online matchmaking. No, what Halo 2 did was make Xbox Live a household name, and brought couch-based gamer rage to the forefront of the video game culture. Okay, the last part probably wasn't invented by Halo 2, but it did bring Xbox Live to the forefront of online gaming. And in many ways, it set the precedent for how online matchmaking is handled today, specifically in regards to its focus on social connectivity and competition. In general, Halo 2 took all the best parts of Combat Evolved and turned the badass knob up to 11. From the music to the badass one-liners,
Oh, I know what the ladies like.
Halo 2 is the super soldier hero fantasy that somehow manages to make the Master Chief in Combat Evolved look like an absolute bitch. Not to mention the changes that Bungie made into the sandbox. That blue glowing energy sword that you saw the elites use in Combat Evolved, you can use that now. The alien rocket launcher that shoots the explosive green blob, yeah, you can blow shit up with that. Oh, the laser beam that Sentinels used? Guess what? You can use that now too. The same is true for the vehicles. You can now drive the Wraith, but who cares when...
Tank beats everything!
And while yes, the Halo 2 multiplayer was super popular at the time, and it did a ton to innovate on the FPS genre, where Halo 2 really shines is in what it did for the overall story of Halo in its entirety. Everything that was present in Combat Evolved was fleshed out in Halo 2. From the Covenant to the Flood, from Sergeant Johnson to the Grunts, everything was given a little bit more background. For example, the story of the Arbiter. For those that don't know, the Arbiter was the elite protagonist that you play as for a handful of levels in the campaign. Anyways, the Arbiter was the supreme commander of the fleet that chased the Pillar of Autumn to Halo in Combat Evolved. and as a result of failing to prevent the Chief's actions, the Covenant hierarchs branded him a heretic, forcing him to take the responsibility of becoming the Arbiter. I would go into more detail about what the Arbiter is, but this video is getting very, very long, so I'll leave a link down to a video that explains what the Arbiter is in the description. This story arc serves as the perfect inverse to the Master Chief story at the beginning of the game. While the Chief gets showered with medals and applause for his actions in Combat Evolved, the Arbiter gets branded and humiliated in front of a public audience. This is a story that most Halo players likely didn't think that they needed at the time of Halo 2's release. But I think after witnessing it, the majority of Halo fans love this addition to the story, how it sets up the dichotomy between the elites and the humans for the rest of the franchise. Which is the perfect segue to start talking about the last game in the original trilogy, Halo 3. There's a lot more I could have talked about for Halo 2, but I feel like it just makes more sense to kind of talk about Halo 2 and Halo 3 in tandem from this point on. As I mentioned earlier, Halo 2's development was stricken by a disorganized mess of massive aspirations made unachievable due to technological limitations and time constraints. Nevertheless, Halo 2 was a massive success, being the second highest selling game of 2004 with 4.2 million copies sold in that year alone, falling just behind the top seller, GTA San Andreas. It's so wild to think that Rockstar has just been dominating the industry for over 2 decades. Like, how wild is that? The hype behind GTA 6 and Rockstar saying that to play the multiplayer, they should be charging people a subscription because the game is just going to be that fucking good. And like, we all believe it, and we all probably would pay the subscription. Anyways, I'm going to get back on track. Maybe I'll do a video on the GTA series at some point in that spot in history, but that's a decision for another time. Also, the Halo series is way more replayable in 2023 than GTA, even with the remaster of San Andreas. Anyways, eventually Halo 2 would go on to reach a total of 8.46 million copies sold, earning the title of the highest selling Xbox exclusive game. That is until it was dethroned by its little brother, Halo 3. With a total of 14.5 million copies sold in the first year alone, Halo 3 was the best-selling game of 2007, and that is an incredible accomplishment when you take a second to look at the games that came out in that year. 2007, at least in my opinion, was easily the best year for video games in my entire life. It's the start of many franchises, it released some of the greatest video games of all time. Just a phenomenal year to be a gamer, and I don't think we've had anything like it since then. Like, I think it's unmatched, easily the best year in gaming in my opinion. Unlike its predecessors, Halo 3 was met with pretty minimal development issues. Bungie was able to reuse a ton of the assets they had cut from Halo 2, and with the launch of the Xbox 360 a few years prior, there were no technological restraints preventing Bungie from finishing the story that Halo Combat Evolved had started back in 2001. As a matter of fact, Bungie really pushed the limits of the 360, particularly in the draw distance, and you can see this when you play the game today. Although I've been playing all 3 games through the Master Chief Collection on my Series X, even back in the day, the game was simply incredible. I know what I'm about to say is a point of contention in the Halo community right now, but I feel like the game could use a remaster at this point. Yes, the graphics certainly hold up, better than the vanilla version of Skyrim Special Edition or Legacy Edition or whatever bullshit release Bethesda's on these days, and that game came out 4 years after Halo 3, but I'd still like to see 343 do a remaster with some of those amazing blur cutscenes that we got for the Halo 2 remaster. Regardless of my opinions on this topic, let's wrap up this part of the video. If Halo 2 was responsible for introducing the first rendition of the contemporary multiplayer experience, Halo 3 perfected it, and it's been all downhill from there. No, seriously, Halo 3 introduced a designated ranked system, open mic lobbies, better customization options, Forge, theater mode, file share, Hayabusa,
it's just not what you're used to.
Army in Chief,
You're poor. You can't afford stuff. Sigh.
Sand Trap, the elephant on Sand Trap, calling kids squeakers. No! The list goes on. And yeah, Halo did do it all before COD. The OG Modern Warfare wouldn't come out for 2 months after Halo 3, and it still lacked the features that Halo had. I mean, what did Modern Warfare do? Give you customizable loadouts? Ooh, whoop-de-fucking-do. Bet that won't become a tired and overcomplicated trope in the future. Halo 3's multiplayer is the true foundation that modern online gaming is built off of. Well, technically Halo 2 is, but I'm going to say it's Halo 3 because Halo 3 introduced all the social elements that are fundamental for the longevity of an online multiplayer game. Well, at least an online multiplayer FPS game. File share, theater mode, and the service record, or stats, if you'd rather call them that, are all staples of the modern FPS genre. Halo 3 was truly the first to do it. Someone can call me out in the comments if I'm wrong about this, but as far as I can tell through my research, Halo 3 was the first to have it all. On the campaign side of things, Halo 3 did its job. In my opinion, of the original 3 games, Halo 3's campaign is the most fun in terms of its gameplay, but I think it has a lot to do with the advancements in technology that the 360 brought to the table. On the story side of things, I think Halo 3 wraps up the trilogy nicely, but it's certainly not as captivating as what we got in Halo 2. That's not to say that it's bad by any means. As a matter of fact, I think that the decision to go with Marty O'Donnell's ideas was a great decision. Keeping up with the trends that the other two games set, the ambiance and musical scores are on point in this game as well, though the music is more subdued compared to Halo 2's rock anthems. Nevertheless, it's still some top-notch stuff. While we're on the topic of the ambiance, I gotta talk about the lighting in Halo 3. Can someone explain to me why the lighting in this game manages to look better than the majority of games that try to flex their janky-ass ray tracing technology today? Maybe that's a me issue because I'm an Xbox boy, but still. Where the graphics and textures are a bit dated for Halo 3, the lighting of this game is just phenomenal. With all three games discussed, I want to lead into the conclusion of this video by going back over what I feel like are the key points I made. First and foremost, the first three Halo games are an important part of gaming history. That's not to state the obvious or coming from a place of Halo fanboy bias. The Halo franchise deserves to be recognized as an important part of gaming history, with a plaque that says the games that innovated and revolutionized the FPS genre. While I feel like it'd be hard to find anybody who would argue against me on this fact, I do feel like this is something that's forgotten given the current state of Halo in gaming today. Don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not discrediting Halo Infinite. I've made an entire video about Halo Infinite, the first video I made starting this YouTube thing, and I think the game is great, one of the best first-person shooters out right now, but I feel like the game is neglected and it's had such a... Halo in general has had such a tumultuous past since being passed on to 343 Industries, so I feel like it's important to just acknowledge this fact that Halo has done a ton for gaming, specifically the FPS genre. And even if Halo never reclaims the spotlight of the gaming industry, I still think that it deserves its spot in the video game Hall of Fame, you know? I mean, Halo 1 made the two-weapon system a staple of the genre, and introduced thousands of kids like me to the concept of split-screen arena-style combat, and above all else, it proved that FPS games can tell a compelling story. Yes, I know games like Half-Life arguably did a similar thing, but is Half-Life really an FPS? Counter-Strike is, but Half-Life? I don't think so. And above all else, Combat Evolved introduced the world to Xbox. It literally wouldn't be around today if it weren't for Combat Evolved. That in itself deserves some kind of spot in gaming history. 3 short years later, Halo 2 would dig deeper and expand the narrative concepts broadly established in Combat Evolved. It would also introduce the most badass soundtrack in the FPS genre. It popularized Xbox Live and established the foundation of contemporary online multiplayer gaming as a form of social media. Of course, I haven't even mentioned it yet in this video, but dual wielding, that's fucking badass, and 343 should bring that back alongside playable elites. A boy can dream. And if Halo 2 innovated on what CE did, Halo 3 tied it all together with a nice little bow. Halo 3 established the essentials of what makes online multiplayer games more than just games, but a social platform. The introduction of ranks, service records, file share, Forge, hell, even Halo Waypoint. These are all things that multiplayer games in the FPS genre sometimes continue to miss in the modern setting. Sure, some games get it right, and these additions are increasingly less important with the current state of social connectedness, but before Twitch clips and Discord, we had file share and theater mode, and I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged. Not to dive too much in what I've learned in my media studies classes, but there's a research article I read about the social side of gaming, and in it the authors came to the conclusion that socializing through online gaming has beneficial effects on a person's well-being. That's paraphrasing it quite a bit, so I'll link the article in the description. But yeah, it's cool to think that Halo was one of the first games to really take the step towards making a video game a social platform like we have them today. I mean, just look at Fortnite with its season event with Eminem. Like, that stuff is just the evolution of the bare minimum that Halo introduced back in 2007. That might be a stretch, but I think you can see the point I'm getting at. And to once again take a step backward, and on a completely different note, if you're someone whose mom always got on your ass about playing video games, go ahead and send her this other article that was published in the American Journal of Preventative Health, where some researchers analyzed a bunch of studies about the effects of playing video games, and I'll quote, most of the articles demonstrated positive health-related changes from playing video games. So take that, mom, or whoever else it might have been or might be who's getting on your ass about it. It's healthy. It's essentially like playing a real sport, but you don't have to actually socialize with anybody, and you don't have to move. So like, sick. Anyways, video games are something I'm passionate about, and the Halo franchise in particular is one of my favorites across all genres. I don't think there's anyone denying Halo's early influence on the gaming sphere, and I know I'm not the first person to discuss the Halo franchise's spot in gaming history. I'm pretty sure I saw a video basically covering this exact same topic. It was released like a week or two ago, or like a month or two ago. I didn't watch it. I'm sure it's a lot better than this one, but this is my second time ever even trying to make a YouTube video, so I think I did a pretty good job. We'll see how it turns out after I finish video editing and everything. So yeah, if you made it this far, shout out. This took a ton of work to even get it to the spot it's in right now, but I was happy to do it because it also fits perfectly for what my final media studies project was, which will complete my minor in school, so worth the time and effort. And shout out the GE that's teaching this class, because he's a boss and he taught a really fun course. So yeah, shout out him. If he makes it to this part, dude, you're so sick, and I hope other kids get the opportunity to take that class with you teaching it, because you killed it. But with all that being said, across many trials and tribulations, Bungie created a franchise that is more than deserving of a prominent spot in gaming history. I appreciate you all for watching. So much work. I'm glad to be done with the audio recording at least. I have no idea what's in store for me next after this project. Excuse me. I might do more long-form essay-style videos like this if this gets a positive reception. Feel free to leave a comment with any tips or suggestions of what I could do better next time, because like I said, this is my second time even attempting to make a YouTube video. I'm sure one thing I could do is make the video portion of it a little bit more engaging. But in the meantime, I do stream over on Twitch. I mostly play Halo Infinite. Probably gonna switch that up as time goes on. The handle to that is Krooked_16. I post clips on TikTok. They're mostly the same clips on YouTube, so keep an eye out for those. Thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate it. And I think that just about wraps things up. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure you've guessed by now, but my name's Krooked, and please, take it easy.